Hey everybody, Heath here again. We're going to be doing a repair video for the M2 today. A lot of people have had issues with big white streaks of their underbase going past their graphic. Let me see if I can bring up a quick little image here so that way I can show you on screen. Let me bring up my monitor real quick here. Okay, so looking at the screen here, we can see that the big white bands, this is what I'm talking about. After it comes back and hits or while it's printing the underbase, it will actually extend past the graphic and leave this big white streak. It can go down, depending on how bad the machine is how bad or how often or how frequent this happens. It is a pretty simple fix if it hasn't gone too far, where it's just cleaning the rails and putting some oil on the glide strips of the machine, and that usually takes care of it. But if you need to take it one step further and actually get to the bearings if one of them has seized up, we're actually going to go through in here and we're going to take apart our carriage so that way we can get it off of this print rail to clean it. Okay, let me move the camera over here a little bit. Alright. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to basically be disassembling this whole unit here. So that way we can get to the bearings that, that help this carriage slide back and forth. Alright. So if you're looking down here at the machine, you can see the glide rails, alright? The bearings actually touch these little silver strips that run down the front and back of the print rail. They do get caked up with ink over time, and those do have to be cleaned. Usually clean that about once a week or once a month, depending on how much I print with. If you print with the lid closed, you will have to be cleaning it a lot more frequently because a lot of the atomized ink and stuff that is during printing will settle on these internal components if you don't. All right, there's also two more places up here on the top of the glide rail. So if you went just right over the lip here, there's another one that's at a 45-degree angle that goes all the way down. And there's also one on the bottom of this print rail as well. So there's 4 points. One on the bottom, one down here at the bottom here. So up underneath the lip here, top of the rail, and right there on the rail as well. Okay, so let's go through and clean it first. What I like to do to clean this is I'll do it with a couple drops of oil instead of like a cleaner, so that way it kind of cleans and oils it at the same time. So what I'll do is take a little paper towel here, just kind of fold it up. We'll push the print head out of the way. As you can see that my machine is powered down right now and unplugged from the wall. Anytime I'm taking apart anything, I always do that. So what I'll do right here is I'm going to take some of this, these are little pinpoint oilers that Coleman & Company sells. So you can order any of these, and it's got a real accurate pinpoint, so when you're trying to oil stuff. So I'm just going to put a couple drops of oil right here on this little surface. And then I want to clean these little strips right here. So basically I'm just wiping these down really well, and as you can tell, a lot of stuff gets down in there. So, and once I'm done with this, then I'll get the up underneath where the print head is now. I'll just move that print head carriage out of the way. A lot of times these things can get dirty when you're doing your evening maintenance, like a little bit of like your rag or something will touch the rail here. All right. See if we got any ink splatters or anything like that. Get those off. And then, oops, we got the bottom rail here. That'll get really caked with stuff on it. Put a couple more drops on. Move the print head back over here to this side. All right. Put a couple more drops on. And do this parts of the print rail as well. Yeah, you don't really get any kind of oil on the encoder strip or anything like that, so just pay attention when you're doing it. All right, so now the next step is we're going to take it one step further and actually get the bearings. So if you look down the side of your carriage, like down these rails here, actually get your head down, you can see the bearings right through there. All right, so you can see one at an angle, and there's also one on this side. So there's the first two. Then the ones that are a little bit harder to reach will be right down there in that little area right here. So I'm gonna actually take this off so that way you can see those. But if I was doing it without doing it on, or while it was still on, I would take this pinpoint oiler here. Let me see if I can get you a little bit closer. Get you a little bit further down here. All right, let's see if I have a flashlight to illuminate this. So if I'm looking right down in here, it's right tucked up underneath there. You can barely see it on the camera here, but you can see that little bearing right down in there. See if I can get my hand out of the way. Right there. So what I'll do is just take this little pinpoint oiler and put a drop of oil right there on that bearing. Right? The next one is right on this rail, and there's one right in this area, and there'll be one up underneath as well. They're a little bit more difficult to get to, but taking it apart can also, if it gets to the point where it's doing those right streaks very frequently on pretty much every other design or something like that, you definitely need to go through and clean these things a little bit better. All right, so let's go through and we'll take a look at taking this thing apart. Like I said, definitely make sure your machine's unplugged from the wall. Let's remove these platens off. Set those to the side. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to remove the dampers from the top of the print head carriage here. Okay, raise this back up a little bit. Get you a better view in here. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to relieve the pressure back here on the CMYK bottles. I never ever want to remove these dampers or any of the tubing when I have not relieved the pressure. You can actually hear it escape when it is pressurized. You hear this little tss of the air releasing. If your machine would be still powered on, like the lower unit, this little light would start beeping and stuff like that. So that's definitely, I want to have that power undone. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to unlock the head here. We're going to take these dampers off and get them kind of out of the way here. All right, so we'll remove the thumb screws first. Let me see if I can park this over here so you can see. Take these thumb screws out first. Set them to the side. Slide this little front rotating bar off. It just flexes out. Once I get that off, set it to the side. We'll unweave the retaining bar from underneath the ribbon cables here. There we go. And then one at a time, I'm going to take these the dampers off, and I'm going to kind of set these to the side. It is always a good idea to have a set of paper towels handy anytime you're dealing with dampers or the ink or anything else. So I'm going to place one down here on this little tray bed, so just in case it drops any. And then I'll have some handy for if anything kind of spills. All right, so what I do when I grab these, I grab it by the bottom of the post here. Pull that around, so right around in there, so I'm not pulling up on the connector, I'm grabbing it by the post of the damper. I wiggle it back and forth a little bit. I always am really careful never to pinch the sides of the dampers, because if I did that, it will definitely drip. All right, if there's an excess of ink right here at the nozzle surface, just kind of wipe that down. And then I'll always kind of, you see how I'm gripping the sides of the dampers here? All right, and I'll always give it a little bit of a squeeze down to make sure it's nice and tight. And then I'll just kind of lay it here to the side and then go on to the next one. Those little tips out, being real careful not to pinch the sides. Make sure it's nice and tight. Set it to the side. All right. last but not least, yellow. This will also help prevent any kind of leaking of ink when I'm putting it back down, that no ink like splatter or starts to pinch out the sides there. All right, set those to the sides. With the white dampers, what I'll do is kind of grab those down here at the bottom, just kind of wiggle those front to back until they come up. And then what I do is flip them upside down like this. I'll blot off the tips here. All right, I always try to pay attention to the sides of my dampers. I look at the screens right here. If you notice, there's a little bit of debris down at the bottom. It'll start building up contamination or sediment, I guess you could say. So if that little bit of sediment down there at the bottom starts to build up probably over about 2 millimeters tall, that might be a good idea to start replacing those white ink dampers. All right, so we'll just kind of tuck these back over to the side and kind of prop them up so that way they don't go anywhere. You don't want them leaking or anything like that. You can also pull them out of this clip, and you can set them right here and kind of lean them right up against that ink harness. All right, so let's go ahead and pull the print head out, because we definitely are going to have to get it out so that way we can take this top portion of the carriage off. So I'm going to raise my little slant lever over here. Let me pull this around. Do my slant lever up. Pull the print head out. Wiggles up. And I'll go ahead and disconnect the cables. All right, make sure there's no damage to those, no ink splatters. Try not to touch the tips of those cables too much with your fingers. I'll also take my cloth and kind of clean around the edges of the print head to get any kind of old or dry ink off of there from it being down in the carriage. A little bit of cleaning solution on your rag will help as well. We'll kind of set this to the side. I don't really want to, it has a protective cage for the nozzle surface, but I try not to face it straight down. I'll kind of put it on its edge here, like so. All right, so now I'm going to start disassembling the top half here, and I'm going to actually remove this whole top half of the carriage. There's 3 screws that go across the top here. First one's right here. I do the 2 outside ones first so it doesn't like dangle or anything. The 3rd screw is up underneath the black box area here, so we'll just go up underneath the hood here, take off these 2 little screws. Those 2 screws are a little bit different than the other ones, so keep them separate. All right, that comes off, just set it to the side. I usually put those 2 screws right inside each other. I can take these ribbon cables, set them out of the way. And then tucked under here is the last screw. So, just to show you again, first one right here, straight down. Next one right here, and then the next one right here. So that'll be the 3rd one. All right. Now, before I go and remove this, what I'll do also is to take these 3 wires that are plugging up here in the CR board out. All right, one's a 4-prong, so you just grab it by the wires, wiggle them up, pull it right out of this little carriage here. So that way they kind of sit to the side. We'll put them back in a little while when we're done. From this one as well. Just make sure the ink lines and the dampers don't get pinched or anything. Okay. We can also take off this little green ground wire too. I think it'll be easier to move stuff around once that's off as well. Okay, so all the wires for the lower half of the carriage are off. Dampers are kind of out of the way. Let's take our last screw out right here. And what this top portion will do is start to lean back, so kind of brace it when you're taking this last screw out. Just let it lean a little bit. So then with this, I can kind of just set this out of the way. Uh-oh, forgot one set of wire right there. Pull those out. So what we'll do is just kind of rotate this down just a little bit, kind of set it there. All right, so back here in the back, the belt is toothed all the way around, so it doesn't really matter where you place the belt on here. But if you want to, take a little Sharpie and mark it. I don't think I have a pen here, so I'm going to do it without it. But it has an indentation in it, so I'll be able to know as well. So we just slide that out. So now this carriage is completely free. Okay. Now we're going to have to get this carriage portion off of the machine here. To get to it, it has a little spring-loaded piece right down here on the bottom. But I can't get to the other spring-loaded piece on this side because our little locking mechanism is blocking it. So let me show you how to remove the locking mechanism as well. You can see it from this side. Just pull these little wires out of the way here. Tuck this one back here in the back. Just get that out of the way. I'm going to unweave this from the side here. And then the two screws that hold this locking mechanism on are at a diagonal. There's one right here, silver, and then it's tucked up underneath this little shelf right there as well. So you take those two screws out, and this whole little piece will slide forward. That's one. That last screw comes out. Set those to the side. And then this whole piece kind of slides to the front. If we bring it over here to the to where the gap is between those two fans, it'll slide right off. So this is our locking mechanism right here. So that whole piece just slides right on there. It's a little magnetic solenoid. All right. So now, looking here from the front, I can see both sets of springs. Let me see if I can get this up a little bit higher. As you're looking down in there, you have this spring right here, right there, and you got this spring right over here. So there's basically little thumb screws. So you grab it from both sides, like so, and you kind of pinch it forward, and it comes off. So basically what I'm doing here, so we can get it back into the mechanisms. You gotta be real careful not to break the springs or anything. All right, so what I was doing, this is the back of the carriage here. So I was pushing up on this, so that way, and pushing up on that one. They do click out, so you just have to make sure it goes back into its little grooves here. There's little holes that it goes into. There we go. So the little holes I was talking about is right there on the front of this. They slide up from the back. Okay. So when I'm pushing down on these, all right. So now I can get to all 8 of my bearings here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. So you can feel the bearings to see if they feel any kind of stiffness to them or anything like that. All right. So there's 2 forms of greasing that you can do. I prefer white lithium grease. It lasts a little bit longer, but you might have to do this maybe once or twice a year to make sure that they stay greased up and not get all caked up. So what I do is just kind of put some grease. Let me back the camera up. So on these bearings, I just kind of I've cut the tip off a little bit, and then I'll just kind of hit this and pack those bearings full of grease. All right, the ones I can at least see. All right. Doesn't need to be a whole bunch in there, but it's just got to get up inside there. The ones that are sideways, they're a little bit more difficult. Just kind of get it down in there. Just little dots. So what I'll do, if you want to have gloves or not, but just kind of work that into the bearing a little bit, spin them around a little bit. I can wipe the excess off with my paper towel. Let's work both of these around in here. Get those things nice and coated. All right. If they are real caked up to start with, there's some stuff that you can get it from an automotive brake store if they have rust on them or something like that, where it's gotten really caked up. Then you can get some brake free. That will actually break those things free, and then you'll be able to rotate them instead of having to replace this $1,000 part. All right, let's see. Get some more of this excess off so it doesn't get everywhere. All right, now the fun part's getting it back on. Okay, so you got it all nice and greased up and everything. To get it to go back on, you'll come back over here. Let's see if I can show you good. Move the camera around a little bit here. So basically I started at the top, right here. So that way it kind of clicks those little bearings on this side in. Then I pinch those two portions, so that way it kind of opens those up. Whoops. If they pop out on you, like that just happened to me, so what I'll do is pop them back in here. See if y'all can see that in there. It has these little openings right here in the back. They fit down into. Okay. Go in from the top here. All right, once you got them on here like so, make sure that encoder strip doesn't get tucked back in there. But once I have it clicked on, if y'all can see down in here, I can see how that spring is not connected right there. So what I do is just kind of shove it up into that little groove. Now it's on there. So let me go ahead and make sure this encoder strip is tucked up into its little slot here. And the encoder sensor. We'll adjust that in a second, or we'll check it in a second to make sure it's gliding through the middle. So what I try to do is work that white lithium grease through there a little bit, so that way it stays nice and smooth. 3-in-1 oil works. Shoot, probably even a motor oil would work. It's just to keep these bearings from getting dried up and stiff and causing vibration when it's going left or right. Clean up any excess here. All right. You can also run a small bead of grease down through these strips too, so it helps them keep nice and lubricated. Make sure all these connection points are good. All right. Now what I'm going to do, feed my belt back in. It basically just tucks right down into that slot. Just use my thumbnail here. Make sure it's nice and even. All right, so now we're gonna have to reassemble it. All right, so with that, once this belt's attached, that means the whole belt system will move. All right, so pull this back over. Just being careful with it. Has little grooves that it lines up with. Just make sure nothing's dripping or anything like that. Pull this ribbon cable back out of the way. So once it has these little slots and the screw holes line up, then I can place my screws back in. All right, the three with the like movable washers are the ones for the top plate here. Magnetic screwdrivers really help. Get that started, make sure it's lined up properly before I tighten it all the way down. Kind of push down on it in the front here. Tighten her back up. It doesn't have to be really tight because it just needs to be kind of thumb tight, or just snug, I guess is the best word for it. All right. Last but not least, get all the right screws and stuff. Once that's nice and secure, then I can go ahead and start putting the rest of the stuff back together. So let's go ahead and start running my wires again. So let's go with the encoder here. Tuck that into its little plastic clip. Run it over here through this one and this one, and the 4-prong goes up here to the front. Okay. Next one is the page sensor. Okay, goes to this front one. And then we'll have to get our little cutting solenoid back on here. Slide it back over to where the fans are, so you can just kind of tuck it up in there. Okay. We'll get those screws started. I'm going to take these dampers and kind of get them out of the way for a second. All right, if you want to, come around to this side. Let's see if I can slide you in here. All right, these are sideways mounted, so I try to get the first one started. A little bit difficult to see this side one unless you go at it from an angle, so sorry if my head's blocking the view for a second. But once you get it started, we'll get it aligned. Okay. So with this, I don't want it to be all the way down or all the way up. So it has some play up and down here. Let me pull on it a little bit so y'all can see it. See, it has that little bit of wiggle room up and down. So I want it to be nice and even and kind of just a little bit of spacing on there. We'll get it started. So that way the gap going all the way across is kind of even from the separation of the plastic. Once they become tight, you'll notice how the plastic is almost touching each other, but it's kind of even. There might be some minor adjustments that you have to do after the fact once we power it back up. Meaning to play with the up and down. If you get like a locking error where it won't unlock the head, that's when you have to adjust that up and down. All right, so now we're going to bring this back over, weave it between here, bring this around. I like to tuck it behind that little plastic piece. All right, feed this on up through here. Goes over the top there. All right, so let's pull these dampers out. We'll go ahead and do I like to feed it underneath the other wiring here, so that way it's the lowest. Weave that back through. And we'll line up our ground screw here. All right. Starting to look like a machine again. Okay. Now we'll just go ahead. I always make sure, since I was moving these around so much, that I make sure to one at a time kind of push in on the boards. If I need to, I push from underneath, hold my hand over here underneath it so it gives me a little bit of firmness. So that way I can make sure these are nice and seated in there before I put my little black box in there. All right, place that down. Slides into its little grooves and then slides back. Put those two screws in. Now we'll go through that whole leveling of the print head, like in another video I have. All right, so now we have all the dampers out to the side here. Ribbon cables are out. All right, so now we'll put our print head back in. So the ribbon cables face a certain way. One faces down, one faces up. If you look at the connection on the print head, you'll notice that the silver portions of the connection, one faces up, one faces down. That's an easy way to remember which way they go into. So you kind of square them up. Use the blue part to be your backbone. You just wiggle them in, square them up. They should fit snugly. This should have the blue part should have no angle to it when it's going in. So I make sure that the silver portions line up. A little bit at a time. There we go. Then I'll place the print head in here. Let me bring it around to this side so you get a better view. All right, so what I like to do is kind of push the print head in this way and then fold it back like that. So it pushes that little tensioning spring up here in the front towards the, pushes it towards the front, so that way the head can click in into the back. All right, so then from there, move this around a little bit. So what I can do is I can pinch, and if you want to get a more detailed video of how to get the head back in, ask me to send over a print head leveling video, and it'll show you exactly where you can grip and where you can't. So I'm actually pinching the sides of the heads now to make sure that the print head is seated all the way into its lowest position in the carriage here. All right, so then I'll let it sit there. Let's go ahead and pull my white dampers back over. We'll line up each one of those. Being really extra careful not to pinch the sides of them. Once I have them lined up, I kind of give them a wiggle down. You can feel them kind of snug themselves onto the post. Then I'll bring my color dampers over one at a time. Once all those are on, I'll weave my retaining bar over. And we'll get the thumb screws started. I don't tighten them yet. Get the long one started. Doing it right over here between the fans gives you a little bit more finger room. I have big hands, so I have to do it this way. Once I have that one started, so then I'll go through and tighten them. Okay, so what I do is put my thumb on the top bracket here, make sure the head is squished down. I'm taking my fingers underneath down here and sandwiching, and I'm basically pinching my two fingers on the black ramp that is next to the head. So what I do is squeeze down, make sure it's front to back is clicked in. I look to verify that it's level or a little bit lower than the black ramp next to it. Keep pinching it together and tighten up the first thumb screw. And I do the same thing for the opposite side. All right. So I reach under, make sure it's clicked all the way in, pinch it, thumb on the top bracket, two fingers on the black ramp underneath. While pinching it tight, tighten my thumb screw. So that way my dampers feel nice and snug inside here. Then last but not least is to slide on my little clip here. You just kind of flex it out a little bit, clips in. Once that's in, you can slide it down, kind of tuck it between those two pieces of metal. It'll slide down both sides of the carriage. That kind of keeps those dampers kind of up and forward. It's not necessary. A lot of the older versions of the printers did not have that, so it's no big deal if yours does not. Okay, once we have that in there, I look at my print head, make sure it's nice and level. And then I have this little retaining screw up here on the very front corner. See my finger wiggling up under there? That's what this slant lever does. It brings the print head and tilts it towards that screw until it gets snug. So then it goes about midway down, sometimes a little bit lower than the original mark. But it just needs to go up to it sort of snug. All right, so then we are reassembled. I'll tuck these little tubes in here. Make sure everything's nice and tight. Cut it from underneath, park it back on top. Let's clean up the mess here. See, I had a little dripping from one of my yellow dampers, so that's why those paper towels were a necessity. Move all my stuff out of the way. If I do want to go one extra step, I'm going to grab a paper towel here and I'm going to grease the rails just a little bit. So, fold up the paper towel here. Get some grease. Work it around in here a little bit. Even one of those little foam applicator brushes would probably work pretty well too. That front rail a little bit. Keeps it nice and moist. The head, make sure it slides back and forth easily. That little half rail up underneath. Slide that back and forth a couple times, make sure it's nice and smooth. We'll inspect our encoder strip, make sure that it's guiding through there properly. All right. Shouldn't be rubbing up against it or anything. nice and smooth going across. I don't feel anything stiff. All right. Click it back into place. Power it up. Yep. Before you power up, always make sure that you tighten up your bottle back here in the back. That way your alarm doesn't go off. Should pressurize, light goes green. Ooh, sorry guys. A little trip up there. Hope you enjoyed the trip. Uh-oh. See, this is what happened right here. This little mechanism, from me messing around with it, it got spun out of the way. See if I can show you that real quick. See, this little thing right here got spun, twisted out of the way, so it couldn't unlock. So, I just have to reset it. No big deal. That was an 84 wide current error. It didn't read the encoder strip properly. That little head release right there. Go. If you have any questions on how to remove this and put everything back together, just the most extreme thing you have to worry about is ink leaking, okay? So make sure that all those connections are tight and kind of have paper towels handy and things like that. Do not get ink on the ribbon cables plugging into the side of the head. That's the cardinal rule. And then from now on, make sure to print with the lid open. So that way all that atomized ink can get out of the work area so it doesn't settle on those internal components, and you'll have to do this a lot less frequently. If you need any further help than this, then definitely get in touch with us on the support line, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.